You're listening to the Unsung Podcast, where we talk about classic albums and decide if they deserve that distinction. And we also talk about some unsung classics in the hopes of bringing them to a new audience. And at the end of it all, we let you decide if we were right or wrong. This is the Unsung Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Unsung Podcast. We have two items of housekeeping to take care of this week because last week we actually had two episodes which had polls. So the first one was the new metal mixtape. Now, as you could probably tell, we really enjoyed recording that episode and we might do something similar to that again sometime soon, so keep an eye out for that. But I'm sure you're all dying to know which of the three albums we picked would make it into our discography. Now, I will just go over those three albums again in case you've forgotten or you didn't listen. Mr. Weaver, he picked Issues by Korn. Chris picked Slipknot by Slipknot, and I picked Toxicity by System of a Down. And the results are in. The public had decided that Toxicity by System of a Down is, out of those three albums, the new metal record which should go into our discography. So, in an unlikely turn of events, System of a Down, welcome. We are kind of happy to have you, I guess. Now, on to our last episode, which was episode 17, where we talked about McCluskey Do Dallas, and the public also voted that this would go into our discography. So this week we put two records into our discography, and that's a good time. If you ask us, that's a pretty good time. So yeah, thank you to everyone that voted, who listened, and who takes part in this weird, wonderful, strange podcast. We haven't done a Scottish record for a wee while, so we felt it's time to rectify that. This week we're doing 14 Autumns and 15 Winters by the Twilight Sad. Enjoy.
Hi guys.
Hi, I'm your host Mark Fraser, and I'm joined by two guys that maybe like Twilight Sad more than me.
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Across from me is Chris Cusack, who
Do you want to do that again, or just want to keep it in?
yeah, no, that's it. Across from me is Chris Cusack. Laugh.
Speechless. Literally speechless.
No,
you're not the first, don't worry.
I know, he's sitting there in his hot pants and his Crocs.
Don't project. Across from me is David Weaver, who's a little bit off today because we're about to talk about a band that's got a more ostentatiously Scottish accent than he.
What? Oh, I just said what? I mean, that. Fuck.
Don't.
You have the most Scottish
make it
accent
worse.
here, Chris.
I have the most Scottish accent here.
That sterling lilt to your accent is.
You're from the Highlands.
Yeah, but it's not Scottish. It's
What is it then? Norwegian?
Well,
Did you know that
Close to it.
20 miles away from where I was born, Fortrose on the Black Isle, that's been scientifically, or I don't know, sociologically proven to be the cleanest English in the world.
I was about to say the cleanest English in the world, the most phonetically accurate is, it's the area around Inverness.
Yeah.
And the
it's
second
Black
is
Isle.
the area around Stirling.
Interesting.
Yeah, there you go. So I'm just behind you in that league.
Aye. Yeah.
But I mean, the English will not have that. They will not be chuffed about that. Where they're like really rounded off. Well, no, where'd that consonant go, mate? I don't know, mate. It's just just
that's a really good spinal tap.
just a barrage
accent
of
you've got
vowels, isn't it? It's just, yeah, everything down south just feels like so languid and so right.
Austin Powers now.
Jesus.
Is this xenophobic? I think this might be xenophobic.
I think they say worse about us on a regular
I
basis.
mean, we get their media.
They're they now, is it?
Other them. just othered the English.
Mate, you're from the Highlands. They're trying to clear that. They're trying to fucking get rid of you guys.
Yeah, I survived though.
Yeah, you did survive. Fucking Highlander.
I know.
Your
They've been
khaki
about
shorts.
for generations.
I was biologically I'm a McDonald, so it doesn't get more Scottish than that.
Proportionally, you're like McDonald's.
Hey, I'm a changed man. You can suck a fuck.
Weaver has lost a stone.
And what?
I'm sorry, man. Body shaming. I'm othering the English.
I know,
You're
Jesus
racist.
Christ.
Like, just all the worst behaviours of the alt-right.
We did
Classic
say.
Chris Cusack.
Going home to get fired into some Jordan Peterson.
Everybody loves him, man.
I don't understand. Like the man's an absolute moron.
He's a very smart
not.
moron.
I mean, he's not a moron. He's an incredibly smart.
No, but he's fucking wrong on so many levels.
He's actually, he's really, really
he's
good
right.
at psychology. His psychology stuff's amazing. He's just a bit a
Twat.
a headbanger.
Yeah.
He's also very religious, and
Yeah, very
yet
religious.
talks about objective truth. This conversation is going in a different direction, but
So this week we are talking about
anyway,
alt-right.
Jordan Peterson notwithstanding, my racial slurs against most English accents, and what was the other thing I did? Yeah, fat shaming Dave. Let's
I'm
talk
trying
about
my
Twilight
best.
Sad.
yeah, Twilight Sad.
Talking about
First record.
14. That's kind of funny.
14 autumns and 15 winters.
Fell asleep midway through the fucking album title.
We don't have a fan here.
We've got a dissenter.
We've got a dissenter. I'm going to put my cards on the table. I really like this album.
I think this is a tremendous album.
Yep.
And on the way to the studio,
You met one of them.
was late because I bumped into Craig, the bassist on this record and the second record. Lovely, lovely man who does a fine line in hats.
He does.
My office is next door to the Rock Action office, in which James, the singer from the Twilight Sad, works. So I quite often bump into him in the kitchen.
So are we
Making
saying
tea.
that the two people here that are positive in the Twilight Sad have vested interests in maintaining existing relationships? And the one who's dissenting is the only one with no vested interest.
I mean, that might be the case,
Some
but
people might see it that way. Cynics.
I don't think that is deliberate. Because if I didn't like this record, then I would probably just
Not talk about
I
it.
would be polite
Yeah,
about it.
If I didn't like this record, I would have strategically not mentioned it because they command a very quasi-religious following
Yeah.
who will tear strips off us
Yeah.
if we go at their boys.
You can send hate mail to hi@thecreatorpodcast.com.
Yeah, please distinguish your letter bombs.
Yeah, so you suggested this though, I think, Chris.
Yeah, you did.
Did I?
Yeah.
I think so.
Again, well,
we
I think it
talked
was
about
another
Scottish
sort of pseudo
records
hive
and-
mind one from you and I because
Yeah.
we're both on the same page about the band, and it was let's give props to the standout Scottish records, and I mean I don't think there's much getting away from the fact that this is a standout Scottish record.
I mean, it is quite a tough listen, but I think that's kind of deliberate because they're not dealing with happy subjects here. I think it's fair to say this is a miserable record. They are, when they came out, they were touted as miserablest Scottish indie folkers.
Which is interesting though, because there were a couple of articles about the band that kind of made the observation that people tend to associate Twilight Sad with, quite negative subjects. And they are, some of the stuff is very somber and so it's quite ambiguous. But for example, James Graham, the lyricist, the singer, James has, by all accounts, had a relatively nice family life. His parents are apparently regular attendees at his shows. It's not like he's Jonathan Davis.
Yeah.
But some people just like writing melancholy music. I mean, it doesn't really
Yeah,
seem
absolutely.
like
It's an escape.
Radiohead didn't really seem like they came from particularly austere or abusive backgrounds, but they certainly haven't gone out their way to play ska. So I don't know.
But I think if you have a healthy cynicism about the world, then it would be quite difficult to write fucking.
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of look at some of the things it's about a bit later on. I think just to kind of bring people up to speed. So I don't actually know the extent of the penetration of the Twilight Sad elsewhere. I mean, I know they've done some really big tours. Even in their first year, they were touring with bands like Mogwai and Frightened Rabbit. They've done a number of tours in North America. I know they did The Cure tour.
that was
So I
just
mean,
recently,
they
yeah.
played Wembley like 3 nights. They played Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, Robert Smith is like a personal fan,
yeah.
and he's invited them down this summer to his like personally curated
Ranch.
Cure shows in Hyde Park, I think, or in London.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'd imagine if nothing else, I mean, certainly they're kind of indie darlings in the States. They've got you know like magazines like Pitchfork and Stereo Gum and stuff like right behind them, and they've done things like South by Southwest multiple times, 5-6 times, something like that.
yeah,
And I'd imagine, you know, that the additional impact of doing things with the Cure has exposed them to a reasonably large audience. They've done some Saturday night shows and stuff as well.
yeah,
But I am not sure how that's translated. Certainly in Scotland, they're one of the biggest acts here in the indie scene, and are associated with almost all the big acts in the indie scene here, be it Mogwai or Churches, or even sort of semi-obscure kind of the heavier bands. With the current bassist Johnny Dock is from Take a Worm for a Walk Week, who were one of our kind of most prominent extreme hardcore bands. And yeah, I mean they're a very well connected band, which has lent them an air of credibility that I think other bands sometimes probably envy. Speaking as someone from another band, that credibility can be hard to marry with success. You know, some bands do well. Some of the bands that they're friends with have done well, but I would suggest lack a bit of credibility and seem a lot more contrived, whereas Twilight Sad don't have that issue. So I'm not sure quite how that comes across abroad. So I just want to kind of give
Well,
people...
it's interesting that they were, I think, like basically over 3 years, 3 bands basically went through the same route. Twilight Sad, and then Frightened Rabbit, and then we were promised
Jetpacks. Yeah.
Packs, all signed to Fat Cat, released a record, got airplay on KEXP in the States, did tours, got Pitchfork reviews, and like the 3 of them all did that basically a year after each other. And I remember going to, I think they all did headline shows at the Arches as well, like basically a year after each other. And it just seemed like a thing. It was like, oh, we're going to have like an annual Glasgow indie band get big, or, you know, Scottish indie band.
To be
get
fair,
big.
those three bands you could be forgiven for seeing a lot of similarities in their style.
I mean, I think they all come from similar places.
Yeah, and
they
there's
also all
heavy use of the Scottish accent, a bit of the kind of the way Twilight Sad are the most extreme, but the way they approach the guitar, the space in the music, the kind of like soaring element of some of their songs, but keeping it relatively dirty. It's not too polished.
But it's interesting that all 3 are still going, and they've all gone down quite different paths. And they're still, you know, all of them are still making records.
Yeah, I mean,
touring
I
successfully.
don't quite know how their audience figures translate in the States, because I was quite surprised to hear how big We Were Promised Jetpacks were in the States. Certainly bigger than they are over here.
Yep.
And I was surprised to hear about the prominence of bands like Frightened Rabbit when you compare them in the States with bands like Biffy Clyro, who over here are playing like Wembley Arena.
Yeah.
And then in the States, we're playing far, far smaller venues. We're not the big potatoes that they are in this country. And I've got a lot to say about Biffy Clyro, and one day I will say it. But it's nice that some bands can really prosper in a different market, and it's really fascinating when you see a band in a certain way and then you find out that in this other country they're seen in a completely different way.
Yeah.
That's pretty fascinating to be like, I wonder what it was that translated or conversely didn't translate about them. But these guys, as I say, for people that are listening out with Scotland, we're maybe taking that for granted. I just want to say that they are considered big players in this scene, and they're considered very credible in this scene. They're in the front cover of a lot of the arts papers. They're fairly well revered, whilst not being huge runaway mainstream successes. It's not the kind of music my mum would know about. I just want to kind of make you aware of the context in which we're discussing them, because it may differ from the context in which you're discussing them. If you don't know them, this is certainly where I think David and I would suggest you access them. You agree with that, David?
Yeah. I mean, their last record, though, has been called their best work, or it's the culmination of everything by a lot of sources.
But we clearly don't agree with that.
No, I would definitely say this first record it's got that absolute rawness to it. It sort of defines them as a band, I think.
James Graham and Andy McFarlane are the two remaining central members. I think that they're currently what's considered Twilight Sad, the two guys. Andy on guitar and does a lot of production duties. James on vocals.
Yeah.
And is in a lot of ways the face of the band, the voice. the tone of the lyricism and things.
Johnny Docherty's been on bass for them a lot.
Yeah, he's been on bass for a long time.
And I think he may well officially be in the band now.
Not according to Wikipedia, but according to pretty much every Scotsman and woman.
And Mark Devine, their drummer, since the beginning,
Mark left in January.
Yeah, he left only a few months ago. So.
Yeah, so Mark was the original drummer and had a very, very recognisable drum approach on all but the third album, which I think we'll get to, but it suits their music where he kind of rests on the end of the bars with the snare.
Yeah.
Just kind of doom, ba da da bum, doom, ba da da bum. Where they leave that final gap and it kind of gives that big anthemic feel to their music rather than
and also maybe like a unfinished, like an expectation. You're just expecting more.
Yeah. So that's become quite synonymous with their sound in the same way as Andy's kind of very, very shoegazy, noisy, squally guitars, which he plays with a whammy as well as he's doing it. So you get quite a lot of like drift in the notes. It can sound almost out of tune at points, and it gives it a much bigger. Combined with the delay, there's a hell of a lot more happening in the guitar sound, which makes it sound pretty huge. So they've got these like quite distinctive approaches to this. I think the fourth member on this album, an original member, was Craig Orzel, the guy with the Fantastic Hats. And Craig left after the second record and was replaced by Johnny Docherty, who also came from Take a Worm for a Walk Week and a number of other very excellent bands, and is by all accounts an extremely nice guy as well. Albeit, I think I once had his testicles on my shoulder and I was driving his band on tour. I couldn't tell. I couldn't recognise the testicles,
the weight.
I don't know if ball sacks have like a distinctive fingerprint, but there were testes there, and he was laughing.
Okay, that's fair.
The guitars remind me of Las Vegas. Is that a thing?
Oh, he said the G word.
Had to.
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
I forgot they existed.
Yeah, so did they.
Somebody did, yeah.
Las Vegas are very much the Scottish band that sort of saw this and thought they'd make a more polished version of it. I mean, Frightened Rabbit are pretty polished. Las Vegas were a step more polished, it felt, and had some commercial success.
They were a band before them though. 2003 Las Vegas started. It's really weird.
Yeah, and why did we not know about them?
Till 2008 after this record was released, I wonder.
Yeah, I can't say I got a lot of time for them, but
not a huge fan either, but the guitar sound definitely comes from somewhere. The two bands share it in common.
Yeah. I mean, I think they saw a good thing, saw a good idea.
Hi, Weaver is currently wearing shorts because he can't afford trousers.
I can't afford full length.
He can't afford full length trousers, and it's really cold today. So if you could donate some money so we can buy him a pair of trousers, that'd be awesome. We're all sober today as well, and we could really use some extra juice. So anything you can give us would be appreciated. I mean, in real life, it actually goes towards getting good equipment and not having to scrape together stuff. So go to www.unsungpod.net and donate whatever you can and whatever frequency that you want. Cheers.
Some bands just seem to kind of hit the ground running, and Twilight Sad, they were signed on their third show in Glasgow, and their first two shows were by all accounts largely experimental affairs, using theremins and tape loops and things like that, and they were both played at 13th Note, which is a fantastic little venue in the city, in the East End, that's kind of known for quite niche music of all types. But yeah, they decided to write something a bit more structured. They wrote That Summer at Home I Became the Invisible Boy, sent the demo to Fat Cat, and the head honcho came up to see them and signed them on the spot.
Yeah, Alex.
And by their fourth show, they were playing CMJ in New York.
Just one of those sort of whirlwind things that just happened. They had the buzz.
People get lucky, don't they?
But I mean, it was very much...
Jackpot. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they were lucky, but also they were really good. They had a sound that was very unique and sort of captured something then that people were waiting for. Because, you know,
That Summer's a great song.
To me, this came out when I was at university. You know, Midnight Organ Fight came out the year after. I find it weird to think of a an indie landscape without these records, without these bands. And Twilight Sad were, you know, this record was the one that was the forefront of it and allowed so much to happen.
But they certainly had that. They had a lot of momentum very, very fast, and that invariably creates buzz. Their first, they had a self-titled EP that was actually only released in the States, wasn't released here, and then they were doing shows with Mika P. Henson when they were over there as well. Even some of their early tours were like Beirut, Battles, Snow Patrol, Smashing Pumpkins, I believe, at some point. Idlewild as well, obviously. So yeah, it's a nice leg up to get started, but they had to follow that up with something to justify the fuss, and it was this album. And I have to say that, cynicism aside, because it's easy to be cynical about any band that gets that kind of start.
Yeah.
But I was impressed with this from the first listen. It's a track, And She Would Darken the Memory, that was the first one I heard, and it kind of, we've got a phrase here, put my gas at a peep. See, it seems appropriate to use that when you're talking about a band.
I don't think I've heard that before.
So reliant on colloquialisms and Scottish patter.
Yeah.
I think that kind of silenced a lot of their critics. Not Mark, clearly, but it did sound sort of like, oh, who's this? They came out of nowhere. Aye, very nice, Silver Spoon and all that. I mean, I think the fact that they did follow up with something really quite worthy was...
Yeah.
I mean,
just the way the album...
They had to.
The
Otherwise...
way the record starts, like, you know, the first 3 tracks are just so strong for me. Cold Days from the Birdhouse.
Originally meant to be a B-side, apparently. Yeah.
But to this day, they still, you know, finish their live sets on it. It's a really, really powerful track.
And also
it could finish this album, but they start with it. They're just like, yeah,
they don't fuck around, because before the song even kicks in, they have James going, another phone call.
Aye.
And it's like, all right, okay, so they're Scottish.
I mean, yeah, you definitely have to get used to that accent.
It's an affectation.
I don't think that's just his voice. You know, why would he put on a fucking American accent or whatever? Just like use his own voice.
Yeah, he's a big fan of Arab Strap as well. And for those that know Arab Strap, they'll be familiar with Aidan Moffat's very strong Scottish accent. And he's James says that he took a lot of encouragement from Aidan's willingness to just embrace.
Yeah, and I think that maybe like us being Scottish, you hear it and you go, oh, maybe, you know, that's kind of, I can't believe he's flaunting it, or it's like, is he putting it on or whatever.
And so you make it your own, but this is where your arm can go. You make it your own.
I don't know if he flaunts
if
it
you
anymore.
hear
The Libertines flaunt their...
Yeah, exactly. There's so many
accents.
like English bands that have got this like fucking London accent, or so many American bands that like just have this American accent. So what's wrong with a Scottish band having a Scottish accent? I think it's absolutely fine. I think it's great.
I can see both sides. I'm a big fan of this album. I think if it had been a lesser album, then I would probably have had beef with the vocal. But I think given the strength of the music, you get away with it. I think you have to earn that.
And its delivery as well is, you know, it's really powerful. Like it is that sort of...
I'm a particularly big fan of it when James goes up an octave and actually gets to like fully project his voice. I mean, the kind of baritone... I say dreary, I don't mean dreary in a pejorative way, but the kind of like that quite sombre delivery that he does is fine. It's nice and it's sometimes very sweet, but when he but when he really projects and there's a bit of gain on the vocal, it's
powerful.
That's when it's its strongest, and that's the same on their second album as well. That the standout track in that second album, I Became a Prostitute, is at its best when he goes up that range and it really like kicks in and you get that little tug. At the heartstrings, of course.
I've got no issue with the accent itself. I just find it as a bit much as a Scottish person.
Yeah.
You know, like I think that it's not as bad as other bands that do it, is what I'm trying to say.
Do you think other bands do it worse?
No, I think it's an affectation. I feel like it is because there's other bands who use the Scottish accent in a much less, I don't know, irritating way. A lot of the early Biffy Clyro stuff, I know you're not a fan, but his accent is not as bad as James Graham's is. And it's still very Scottish.
I mean, I would say that's fair.
I like those early Biffy Clyro records, mostly. I wouldn't go to bat for them. I enjoy listening to them. I don't listen to them regularly, but, you know, whereas on the other hand, you can see there's some bands that have taken, like Twin Atlantic, who used to we're a bit Scottish, and then when Spiffy Clyro became a big thing, became more Scottish.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that from this point onwards, the Scottish affectation in vocals became ubiquitous. Even just seeing the bands that translated elsewhere, it became very, very heavy-handed, I felt. Twilight Sad had been pretty open about it from the start, and it was used in a much noisier kind of music and a much less precise kind of music. I think in the more polished stuff like Las Vegas and some of the Frightened Rabbit stuff, it doesn't work for me at all. Like, I really find it quite grating and quite contrived, but I don't mind it in the context of this, because this is everybody pushing their style into a corner, but in a good way. So the drummer has a style of drumming, Andy has a style of guitar, James has a style of vocals, and the bass was just a really solid element in their music throughout. It wasn't overly stylized, but the other three had really delineated, this is my preferred approach, and I didn't mind that so much. I do think that other people probably started to cash in on that once they saw the appeal in it, and once they realised that it was getting fetishized by, you know, Brooklyn vegan and things like that, because it really was. I mean, in the States, it's just a condescending approach to, like, oh, listen to that Scottish accent, that's so cool. It's like, Jesus, man, people shout that at me in the street when they want change. It's like, it did wear pretty thin, but not so much with these guys for me. I think they were. I did feel there was something pretty sort of.
Just a point of content, a point of that I want to make as well is, see when he does go up that octave, there's less room to do an affectation as a singer, and his voice does sound better for it.
I think his voice is really strong when he goes up that octave. I think he's developed as a singer as well over their albums. He's a much stronger singer now. It's less rough. There's some live videos kicking about. There's one in KEXP that I think they shot in Iceland that I don't think showcases his vocals very well. It maybe doesn't showcase the monitoring at the gig very well, I have to be fair.
Yeah.
But he has definitely improved as a singer. And they've done a lot of stuff that's quite sparse and stripped back. They did a number of sessions, did an Oran Moore session that was quite famous, and they did some stuff for the BBC.
Well, I was at their show with the RSNO in Paisley Abbey, where they did, you know,
that was
the
lush,
three of them and then a full orchestra.
Yeah,
but a lot of it, there was like very little orchestration in a fucking huge church,
and
then it would build up. But his voice held as strong as any of the instruments there. It was like they weren't outshone.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely learned better vocal control. I think the first BBC session they did, which was just like glockenspiel and accordion, was raw but nice, and it worked. But if you don't like his Scottish accent, don't listen to that, because that'll kill you, because it's right out in the open.
Because I'm putting up with your constant whine, but that won't last too long.
They had a lot of support here by the Skinny magazine. The Skinny was really on message with Twilight Sad from an early point, and so they got pretty good exposure and some pretty decent, you know, I think are they the band that's been on the cover the most, I think, to date.
Yeah, they probably are, yeah.
And they've had kind of some quite good interviews, and they were the Skinny's album of the year in 2007, I believe. Same year that I said that Blonde Redhead should be album of the year, by the way. 23.
I believe the internet have disagreed with you on that, because it's up against In Rainbows. But
yeah, we'll see. Also, another big supporter of the band in 2007 was Teletext.
Teletext, really?
Planet Sound on Teletext. Remember Planet Sound? Yeah. So did Teletext happen out with the UK? It must have, right? We can't have
no,
led the way.
It was a very British thing.
And coloured button driven interaction.
What was it? It was
the early internet.
What was it actually called? Like the name
Oracle. CFAX.
Well, CFAX was the BBC one.
CFAX was the brand. Teletext was like the non-brand. But like what? Yeah, maybe Teletext was the overall name.
All right.
As
so
well.
so basically, again, for millennials and people out with the UK,
I'm a millennial. I remember Teletext. I used to read Planet Sound
for real millennials. For people out with the UK, basically sort of hidden behind your TV channels and your domestic TV channels. We only had 4 and then 5 for a while.
Yeah.
Behind the TV channels, on your remote control, there was like a red, green, blue and yellow button, and you could press, I think it was the text button or the blue button.
Yeah.
And it would bring up this kind of like signal of like, it was basically like a very simple web page.
Yeah, a black background with white text, some colour.
Written in the biggest pixels you've ever seen. Like,
and pages 100 to 199 were news, 200 to 299 were finance, 300
Did you go them all?
300s were sport, 302 was the football index,
There's the travel
312 was the Scottish football scores, Page 324 to 327 was the league tables. Man, I can remember this exactly.
This is incredible, man.
And then, what was 400? I think 400 was weather.
501 was Bamboozle, was it not?
No, Bamboozle was in Channel 4. That was on Channel 4 rather than CFAX. That was 152.
So again, all the different channels had like their own version of it. So Channel 4 was the fun channel. It was the arty channel in the UK. So it had the fun things in its version, which it was Oracle or CFAX in that channel. Oracle?
I think Oracle. It was older. It was like
so
an
basically
older
they had a
version,
thing called Bamboozle, which was like a quiz, and these are all like super basic kind of approach to
pre-internet.
Like they're like the TV equivalent of those adventure books where it's like turn to page 80 if you want to bite the orc.
Well, the thing on teletext holidays, which is still a thing now, even though teletext doesn't exist, was you'd get really good deals on holidays.
Yeah, that's true. But it was a big part of our childhood. Like it really was this odd.
Well, you can tell it's definitely a big part of mine.
Yeah,
Still
absolutely.
remember the page numbers.
Memorize the numbers. You should do a book in that. But yeah, so this is it's really obscure. I mean, we should try and throw up some screenshots on the page just to show people like what CFAX and teletext was, because it was so bizarre. But yeah, so teletext loved them. Album of the year on Planet Sound in 2007, and I'm actually surprised that Twilight Sad overlap with Planet Sound.
Yeah,
I wonder who wrote Planet Sound. Have they actually got some people that were like totally into it? Because that's a pretty hip choice. I mean, they could have gone with pretty much anything, but they went with Twilight Sad.
Good on them.
Yeah, man. That would be my line of merch if I was in the band.
Teletext album of the year 2007.
Album of the year 2007.
Aye.
In big pixels on a black t-shirt.
Definitely. With Bob from Bamboozle on it.
And a number up the top.
Yeah,
fantastic. And I think this was also like Skinny's number 2 album of the decade at one point. When they did
and I know
it
was voted up there in like best Scottish records ever and stuff like that as well.
Right. So Mark, it's just you're becoming more and more of an outlier at this point.
I'm a punk man, so this is not my kind of music.
I know, but I'm a metalhead. I don't know. When I was back at uni doing student radio when this came out, and like a lot of my pals doing the radio were indie kids, and I was this metalhead but listening to Aphex Twin as well. So like to me, I wasn't really interested in it. People were talking about it. I was like, oh, just indie shit. And then I listened to it like maybe a couple of years after the record had actually come out, and then I saw them live, and I was like, fucking hell, this band are powerful. James down in the audience, like just absolutely fucking screaming to Cold Days in the Birdhouse. Like you can tell that he's singing about something in there, and they're as heavy a band live or as loud a band live as any. Really,
was it Talking with Fireworks? Here It Never Snowed. That's like the one they call Loud Quiet Live, and that was one where it's quite quiet with a kind of marching drum beat. Yeah. But then James would be playing a second cymbal, and the chorus was just cacophonous.
The drum beat as well in that's amazing.
Knife in your chest. With a knife in your chest.
Yeah, it's like marching.
There was a lot of like performance that made them quite an appealing prospect. The show I saw them doing at Tuts, which I think was their first Tuts show, was exceptionally good. I'd seen them prior to that, and I wasn't blown away with them live at all. I thought they were pretty rough. The songs were nice. I already liked the album, but they weren't doing it live. But then that time at Tuts, everything kind of clicked, and they were excellent, really, really excellent. That was one of the best shows I'd seen in quite a while. I mean, around the album itself, it was quite iconic. The artwork was by a guy called David Thomas, Dave Thomas, DTR or something like that. What he calls himself, DLT,
like Dave Lee Travis.
Yeah, Dave Lee Travis. He'd done a series of pictures for it, which were on the singles as well, all themed around this little boy with this kind of little mask on. Yeah. And when they did the anniversary show, was it an anniversary show? 2013, they did shows at Tuts with the full album, and they'd handed out like handmade fabric versions of the masks to the members of the audience. But the artwork was really quite iconic as well, and really, really good artwork.
Yeah, it's really...
I loved it. Yeah, it was nice and obscure and slightly unnerving, but not trying too hard.
Yeah.
There's a vague poignancy to it that seems to really complement their overall feel. Yeah, so I mean, there was a lot of buzz around this at the time. There was a lot of like strong branding of it, albeit in a very alternative way. It had a really good look. Yeah. It had a really good feel. It was just slotting into this weird zone between really alternative bands, playing with some quite underground, quite obscure stuff under the collective called Winning Sperm Party. We're big fans of Twilight Sad. Yeah, it could also be in a bill with Mogwai. Yeah, it could also be in a bill with some much more kind of commercial or ostensibly commercial bands. So they hit like a real sweet spot between credibility and accessibility.
Yeah.
That they seem to capitalise upon. Before we get into the kind of minutiae of the songs, I don't think they necessarily followed it up brilliantly. I think Forget the Night Ahead is a good album.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of good songs in it later on that are good, and there's an exceptionally good song in I Became a Prostitute.
In the crowd, and she's bawling her eyes out. Only girl.
Which is one of
I
the
really
best.
like The Room as well. That's a great track.
But I think even the reviews had sort of said they were in a little bit
Well,
of a holding pattern.
Yeah, it's darker as well, though, a little bit, I think. I really like that record, but for me, I think like their following 3 records after this, you can pick some amazing tracks from. And like, you know, their live set for me is like fucking absolutely rampacked of belters. But
Is
It's
it
this-
Nobody Wants to Be Here, Nobody Wants to Leave? Is that
that's
the name of the third
last-
album? And the third
that's
album?
the 4th album.
That's the 4th album?
Yeah.
Right.
No One Can Ever Know is the 3rd record.
No One Can Ever Know, right, sorry. No One Can Ever Know is the one where they made a deliberate decision to kind of change direction, so to speak, and they went in a much more kind of industrial, krauty field.
In your way.
It's produced by a guy, Andrew Weatherall, as well. He'd done stuff like Fuck Buttons and things like that, and it kind of had a really different feel to it. It was a lot more motoric. You know, like a couple of tunes in particular, a song called Dead City has that really kind of typically motoric drum beat behind it. The aesthetic's quite different, less of the shoegaze kind of squalls going on, a bit colder. It didn't pull me in. I think there's some nice melodies on it. I think there's a track called Nil that could have been a really big song played in their old style. They obviously decided to do it differently, but I'm not sure. It didn't really work for me as well. The drum sequencer stuff I found quite.
I remember
alienating.
it didn't get particularly, it wasn't particularly well received compared to the first couple of records, but for me now it holds together pretty well.
I mean, I've seen some really good reviews of it in the sense that people were praising them for opening up their palette because it meant that otherwise they were going to just be repeating themselves.
Yeah.
And I think they certainly managed that. And it probably led to stuff like The Cure, because otherwise it might have been a little bit too noisy and dissonant and narrow. Because there's a lot more synths in this album.
Yeah.
And certainly working with Martin and then going to work with Brendan and stuff and involving them in the band gave them a bit more room to manoeuvre in terms of like pop stuff. I'm just not sure that musically it was anywhere near as successful in terms of the writing. I mean, I don't think it's bad by any means, but it doesn't pull me in. I do much prefer the new album, although I think the new album is a lot cleaner.
You won't leave tomorrow. I don't know what all went wrong. So leave with me alone. Stay with me.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about this is Andy produced it. It was recorded at Chem 19, which is a fairly well-known studio in Scotland. And I think Andy's production has a naivety and an unfussiness and a sense of
Yeah, it's quite
identity.
dirty.
It's nice. You're really hearing the composer realising what he wanted to say as opposed to filtering it.
Yeah.
And I think the warmth of that, the directness of that, to me, draws me in a lot more. Song-wise, I mean, you described Cold Days from the Birdhouse. It's a big opening, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
And then track 2, That Summer.
That Summer at Home, I Became the Invisible Boy, was the one that, I think, is that not the one that got them signed in the first place?
Yeah, I think you might be
Yeah,
right.
and or at least a demo of it did. You know, and the imagery and the kids are on fire in the bedroom kind of hook line.
Yeah,
that was
I think that's, you
pretty-
can see why that stands out from anything that's sort of gone before it.
yeah.
Plotting away. The kids are on fire in the bedroom.
I mean, I have to say, like, I think if Twilight Sad ever did like an incesticide, you'd have to call it The Kids Are on Fire in the Bedroom. It's like a bootleg title just waiting to happen, isn't it?
And Walking for 2 Hours is then another like really powerful track.
Yeah, it's
Like-
got that kind of like uneasy, seasick sort of slide guitar line in it,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Did any of the tracks early on pull you in, Mark?
Well, I was just reading my notes there actually when you were talking to me. I did like Cold Days, but I did find it quite difficult to find something to say at all about Walking for 2 Hours. I like a lot of the understated nature of what they do. I like the massive like wall of sound guitars, and when they do get going, they do sound a bit like a total orchestra. So it is a wall of like noise. It gets up there in Mogwai, you know, in that sense. But I've always found it really difficult to engage with shoegaze in any kind of way, and this is just kind of.
I mean, there's a huge shoegaze influence on the sound here. So yeah, if you're not shoegazy, then I can see how you might miss that.
Shoes, Last Year's Rain, the 4th track, is, I think, harkening back a bit like the last track as well. 14 Autumns, the title of the album. Those ones harken back to that kind of origin as like a bit of an experimental thing.
Yeah, it's definitely more ambient.
It's like half a song almost, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, it is actually, you're right. It
feels like not a filler, but it's like a gateway between.
Yeah, I mean, it's a piece
of record, but I really like it. Like, I love that sort of nursery rhyme refrain that he's got.
Yeah, and the kind of the sleigh bell type vibe that goes through it.
Because I think it works. Because then, man, if they just had 9 songs that were all, you know, indie anthems, you'd probably be fucking knackered by the end of it.
Yeah.
But this is maybe like you mentioned last week, you know, about an album that lets you turn off a track that lets you turn off for a little bit and collect your thoughts.
Yeah, it's like a concession to the attention span of the audience. I think you're like, okay, they'll need this at this point.
Because then Talking with Fireworks then is just fucking massive.
Yeah, that's the one, the loud, quiet one that is just like all about the dynamic. Track 6, mapped by what surrounded them, I think is one of their best.
I was going to say that stood out for me.
Yeah,
definitely.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one that you can definitely tell, maybe not shoegaze, but other 80s influences. There's like some sort of, you know, even like gothy bands and like the chord progressions and stuff. And you can maybe see that a Cure influence and also why the Cure would, you know, enjoy this.
I think there's a few interesting things about this track. So the title is taken from The Virgin Suicides, the book by Jeffrey Eugenides. And obviously there's a film as well. And the allusions in it to like a child dancing, a child being taken too young, watching Emily play, things like that. It was quite dark, but quite obscure, quite melancholy. What I thought was really interesting is a few years ago, there was a rumour kicking about that this was actually to do with the fact that James's family knew a victim of the Dunblane massacre.
Right.
And so I was like quite fascinated by this because it is one of those little bits of lore that you're like, is there anything to that? You know, I've never asked them directly, but it was a few people who had mentioned this.
Oh, really?
Like, have you heard that this is what this is about? The Dunblane massacre obviously happened in 96, it wasn't 96, was it 92?
No, it was, I remember I was in primary 6, so I think it would have been 95, 96.
95, 96. Yeah, so I think it might have been 96. A guy called Thomas Hamilton went into a primary school in a town that's about 8 miles away from Stirling, where I was brought up, and murdered 16 children and a teacher. Yeah, called Gwen Mayer, I think her name was, and that was a huge thing. Actually, weirdly, I grew up about a few hundred yards from where Thomas Hamilton lived, and he'd been at the shop getting milk when we were around the Sunday before the shooting, which happened on a Tuesday, I think. Yeah, it was really odd to see that. The guy's whole story was pretty dark. He saw himself as a bit of a Frankenstein, you know, thrown out by his community. But anyway, interesting story if you care to look into it. Pretty dark. But I thought, I wonder what's to that, and I had a look, and there was a girl killed in Dunblane called Emily Morton, and obviously throughout this song he talks about see Emily dance. Yeah, and I was like, so I don't actually know if there was anything to that. Yeah. It could just be somebody's put 2 and 2 together and got 5, or it could be that somebody in the band's confided someone and it's spread. So I don't know. Here I am, irresponsibly spreading fake news, probably on the internet. So
the internet
I'll just
can
add
correct
to the pile.
us if that's
but there you go.
correct.
I looked up the list of victims and I was scrolling down. I was like, nah, there'll not be someone called Emily, and there she is.
Yeah.
You know? So I've no idea if that's what it's about. But certainly, on more than one occasion, I'd heard that. And it's a really dark song. In the sense, it's a very, not dark, it's a very melancholy song. Yeah. Very sad song. And it's a really beautiful one.
And these walls are built with flame.
And it's followed by, I think, what's probably their best song, and She'll Be Dark in the Memory.
'Cause I'm putting the button to now. Head up, dear, you're shallow and blind.
The kind of easing in
Yeah.
with that drum beat filling in and the little melody coming together. It doesn't just burst in, it's very patient. And it's another great example of James taking his voice up a range,
Yeah.
you know, going up top, cracking it, getting a bit of distortion on the vocal, and it's a really powerful bit of music, that one.
And head up, dear, the Robin May
Nice big shoegazy sprawling ending to it as well, kind of keeping them away from that overly commercial side of things that I think bands like Frightened Rabbit are too, like I said, too polished, too clean for me. I like the fact that Twilight Sad do embark in these big cacophonous jams that just allow their songs to sort of burn out
Yeah.
rather than stop. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the best examples.
Putting the boot in, mate, frags me out.
You don't, so because I'm
The best bit of it is the worst
because I'm
bit for
putting
Mark.
the boot in,
Yeah.
and that is a Scottish phrase for if you're just kind of adding insult to injury. I mean, it's also a Scottish phrase. You're kicking someone when they're down, but you're putting the boot in. You're just causing unnecessary additional hurt to someone.
Seems accurate.
To your sensibilities, certainly. I'd imagine they'd probably quite happily put the boot into you.
Probably.
But yeah.
The last proper song is "I'm Taking the Train Home,"
Yeah.
which is that really nice refrain in it when your green eyes turn to blue.
Yeah.
Your green eyes turn to blue. Your green eyes turn to blue. And you're always.
I mean, overall, I just think it's a really fucking great record.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the best thing they've done for me. I think they've had their moments since. It's not a
I think
slight
they're
on them.
an excellent live band as well. Fucking brilliant. But like, I can always go back to this album if I feel like I want to wallow in being miserable a little bit, being Scottish a little bit.
Yeah,
It's a fucking great record to
what
do
would be
that in.
really interesting to see is, like, I suspect there'll be a pretty reasonable engagement with this within Scotland, within our listeners here.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see how much it inspires in people from further afield, because we've got a few people in Australia and the States listening in. I'm curious to see how precious people are about the band over there, because they're certainly quite precious about them here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that'll be interesting. I definitely think in Brooklyn there'll be a few. They seem to have had no shortage of enthusiasts.
You think I'm going to get killed for not liking this?
It don't seem like the kind of murdering type band. They seem
I
quite
mean, by our
passive.
fans, not by them.
By their fans, possibly. Probably not nearly as much as I'm going to get killed when we do Bjork, but they are a band that inspires quite
Pathological. Fandom.
quite a loyal following here. So yeah, I mean,
And built on this album.
you might need to change one or both names, but I don't think it'll be that big a deal.
But I think they should go in.
I mean, yeah, I think from a Scottish perspective, there's no way you can't put this in.
Yeah.
I don't think. So it'll be interesting to see how that balances out on an international basis.
Great. All right, what we doing next week?
Don't know.
It's your choice,
doing-
David.
what we're doing
Why
next
don't you
week.
tell us?
Bjork.
Stop being coy.
And Vespertine.
What?
Vespertine.
Was that so? I
We're
was
doing
talking over it.
Vespertine.
I'm talking over it again.
Oh, fuck off. I'm looking forward to that one.
What one?
Bjork, Vespertine.
Yay! Go and vote on the Facebook page, please, and tell us why
Oh.
this shouldn't go in.
Can we get some reviews, please?
Yeah, we need some reviews.
Like, and not if you don't like us. Can we get some good reviews, please? Can we just get good reviews, please? We'll put out the comments cards on your table after your delicious meal of hilarious musical patter, and we want to get our TripAdvisor rating right the fuck up there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So iTunes a shit out of it. 5 stars. That's the
5
one.
stars, yeah. It's a very good podcast, apparently, according to 2 people. So,
Thanks, them.
thanks, guys.